Welcome to Assessment Trackers, Tools for Teacher Teams. My name is ODonnell, and I'm the Director of Technology for Teaching Matters, which is a nonprofit organization, and we were founded in 1994. And our mission is to measurably improve teacher effectiveness. And over the years, we've found that the most efficient and effective way to do this and to get to student outcomes is through teacher teams. And so specifically, we help schools set up highly organized and goals-driven teacher teams that are continuously examining our practice, their curriculum, their assessments. And we try and get to them to a point where they're comfortable enough to be leveraging each other's experience. So that they're at a point where they're honest enough with each other where they can be continuously improving. So that's kind of how Teaching Matters operates traditionally. We're not beholden to Google or anything like that, but we do see a really nice fit for Google Apps for education in this process because communication and collaboration it's the core of any highly successful team or successful school. And so we see it as a perfect platform for setting up that healthy culture of collective capacity. We found that it has a very low barrier to entry, which is really important to us. We're traditionally in New York City public schools, mostly struggling schools, and so having something that is accessible to teachers and that is comfortable to teachers and isn't intimidating is very important. Because that's our focus, that's where we start from. So we find that it is a great enabling technology for teacher teams to be creating and sharing things like curricula, like assessments, like project-based websites, and also like data trackers. And that's what we want to focus on today. So what I would like to do, I would like to expand a little bit farther on how Teaching Matters approaches data and how we look at it. I'd like to come up with a definition of what we're calling a tracker. Then I have some examples of trackers themselves, and then I thought we would just open it up and take questions on either how to implement trackers, or if you have specific questions about the formulas or functionality or Google scripts that could be used for setting these up in your schools or with your process, we can go into that. And I do have, I've never done a webinar in this format. Usually I have a lot more control over the audience and who's talking. But since we're a very small group, I would welcome the idea that we pretend that we're at a conference table. Feel free to ask questions. Feel free to interrupt. Again, we're New York City based, so I'm not fazed by aggressive communication styles. But don't be offended if I ask that we say some stuff and need to move on. We do only have about 40 more minutes or so. But it would be great if we could just go around the table and introduce ourselves. If people wouldn't mind, if you could just say your name and who you are, who you work for, what your angle on Google Apps is, that'd be great. I usually don't do this, but since I have no other way of getting started, I'm going to put Brett on the spot. Brett, do you mind going first?
That's fine. My name is Brett Tracy. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm what we call a technology teacher trainer. So I actually work with teachers integrating technology into their classrooms and with their students.
Great, excellent. And Eric, you're next, if you don't mind.
Well, my name is Eric Simmons, and I am a tech integrationist in St. Paul, Minnesota. I work at a kind of a 5 through 8 middle school right now, 1-to-1 iPads.
Okay. I think I just scared the other guy away.
I think you did.
Well, we'll keep it comfy. We've got three technology-focused people. So let me talk a little bit more about how Teaching Matters views the use of data. We kind of have a specific. Oh, sorry, I hate it when it does that. It kind of tunnels down on you. Okay. We have a specific bent towards the use of data. Again, because we're focused on teachers, and so we have a methodology that we implement, and we have 3 real core tasks that teacher teams have to look at. And they do this very frequently. They do this in cycles, and we believe strongly that they need to be looking at student work real regularly and teacher work, meaning either observing each other or observing video of their instruction. That they need to be designing quality, common, and formative assessments. And that's really critical when you talk about data, because if people aren't on the same scale and if they aren't looking at the same indicators or power standards, and if they haven't come to agreement about what is important in their instruction, then you can have all the data in the world. It's not going to matter. You know, if you don't have anything to compare it to or anything to have a conversation around, it's very difficult for a teacher to identify where their instruction is you know, might not be strong enough. And so that's why it's important to have those common assessments and have that common curricula so that you can have those discussions. And then finally, reviewing and responding to data. And this is all in support of setting instructional goals as a team. So a typical process would be a team coming together after a common assessment. They look at the data, start asking questions about it, come up with a set of questions that they that they want to learn more about. They triangulate, meaning they bring in other data sources to affirm their hypotheses that this might be what's going on. And then based off of that, they set a goal. It's usually a 6-week goal on how they're going to modify their content or their curriculum or their instruction. They come up with an evaluative mechanism for doing that to make sure that once they do this, that they have evidence that they are actually improving what they're saying they're improving. And then they rinse and repeat. So my only point with this, and to emphasize this, is that there's a lot of work that goes into this process before you create the technology to support it. The technology to support it, we're all tech people. This is the fun part, making the formulas work and getting it to report out in such a way that is meaningful. But the majority of the work has to come from the content and the assessment side. So Google Spreadsheets, I don't think I need to convince anybody as the power of them, but I will just point out that they are the perfect tool for common collaboration. A Google Spreadsheet is very different from Excel in that it's cloud-based, it's easily shared and accessible, but at the same time you can keep it private to the people that it needs to be private to. And it can be a central spot for data entry for a team of people or for individuals. The other really interesting thing about Google Spreadsheets is the Google Scripts API that has been introduced, and some of the formulas that just allow spreadsheets to be stringed together and layered upon each other. So if you have trackers that are tracking data at a very granular level, you can create sheets maybe on a more administrative level above them. So say you have a teacher, a grade level spreadsheet. You can create a spreadsheet above that for maybe the team leader that's only pulling in teacher data. And above that, you could create another spreadsheet that is for the principal that's pulling in from multiple sources, so you get a dashboard for the entire school. I have a couple of examples of those, of that functionality, and we can talk about that in a minute. Quickly, just a definition of what I'm talking about as a tracker. A tracker I see is very different than a gradebook. A gradebook gives you really important information about how students are doing on assessments, but it gives you that raw number that doesn't necessarily tell you where in those assessments they're struggling. So if you give a common or baseline assessment, it's probably addressing 7, 8, 9, 10 different standards. 5 or 6 of those are power standards that you want to focus on throughout the year. But that raw number that the student got 85 out of 100 doesn't really tell you where they're struggling. And so a tracker is something that tries to dig deeper and really go at the indicator or the standard level. Typically, trackers are looking for mastery or at least proficiency. And in all the cases I've worked with, at least, a rubric usually accompanies this work. So really, it's anything that has students as rows, indicators as columns, and columns can be treated as progress over time. And that's kind of the definition that I'm working with for this. Did you guys have any questions at this point? Do you want to look at some samples? No? So I've got a few examples here. This first one is a tracker we created for a genre-based ELA unit in middle school. The curriculum is called Writing Matters. It has 7 genre-based units, and it's most appropriate for 7 through middle school, 7th through 9th grade. And this is what it looks like. So the way this tracker is organized, I'm going to skip over to column L here and just show you where the different units fall. So there's 7 units. It starts off with a baseline, and this is just a means of collecting baseline data at the beginning of the year. Moves on to Mastering the Essentials, which is an introductory unit. Response to Literature, Writing Editorials, Memoir, Short Fiction. We've only got data, and this is actual data. I've hidden the student names. For the first 3 units, that's where they are in the process. Actually, I think there might be 2 units. I just haven't updated my demo here. So the units are chunks of columns, and the nice thing about Writing Matters is there is a common assessment after each unit. The students are expected to publish a piece in that genre, and the rubric for each genre is consistent with each other. So in every rubric, it's evaluating the students' use of topic and ideas, students' use of organization, of language, of conventions, and this last domain is called genre characteristics, and that's kind of a catch-all for this specific genre that they're in. But what it allows you to do is it allows you to have common indicators. Oftentimes, schools would call these power standards, or they might rearrange them to be power standards on every unit throughout the year, and so you can track progress over time. The scale for the rubric is in the upper left-hand corner, so anything that's red scored an 11 to 12, which is the lowest score you can get with this unit. The scale is 11 through 20, and it's a bell curve. The reason the scale is 11 through 20 and isn't something simple like 1 through 4 is because this unit was designed with 5 domains, and so if you take 20 and times it by 5, you get 100. So the total for each of these adds up to 100, which is a nice round number that teachers understand contextually. It's almost their score. You could use it as a grade book as well as a rubric score. So with each unit, you have the totals for the entire class or whoever's being assessed on the tracker at the top, and then all the rows are the students themselves. First name, last name, full name, the class, so there's multiple classrooms. There could be multiple teachers all entering data on this one tracker. And then groupings. With this one, the ability to group by ELL, English Language Learners, or by IEP. And all that allows you to do is filter your data so that you're only, you can only pull up the ELL students if you wanted to see how they're doing. Select all. Multiple filters, sorry. All right, so there's conditional formatting on each of these cells, and I can go into how that operates further. So if you score 13 through 15, it turns yellow. 16 through 18, it turns blue, and if you're 19 or above, it's green. If you're on the lowest, it turns red. So this is the entry tab for the tracker itself. And now, so this is basically where your raw data is. Now on your spreadsheet, you can start to break this data down and disaggregate it. So these tabs at the bottom allow you to do that. There's a tab called By Student, and what this allows you to do is select the individual student you want to look at from the drop-down, and then it pulls up just their data so that it allows you to look at how they're doing in the different domains. So I'm looking at Albert. I can switch over to Maggie. These tabs next to here are the domains that you can look at over time. And with this particular curriculum, it's set up to always operate off of the baseline. You can't necessarily track unit to unit. The differences between writing a poetry piece and writing an editorial are too great to compare them to one another. But what you can do is compare them to your baseline, the beginning of the year assessment. And so that's why these numbers are positive or negative. So if I look at Danya here, she originally, at the beginning of the year, got a 16 in topic and ideas, went down 2 points, meaning she got a 14 in Unit 1, and then got a 16 again in Unit 2. So it allows you to start creating groupings of students based off of their performance on the various indicators. You have the same thing for organization, for language, and for conventions. And just by looking at this, you can kind of see some things on this. If you look at this data, I'm seeing a lot of red on language. If I was a teacher, I might want to focus on language. You know, that's one of the notice and wondering questions that I might ask when I go to my team meeting about that. So this is an example of you know, a pretty traditional tracker, and this could, you know, you could obviously do this with any subject area. Writing is a little bit unique in that you have this, you know, you have the ability to do these, you know, core 4 or 5 standards over time. If you're doing math or science, those you might have to build those standards out to, you know, 10 or 12 even over time, and take a look at it that way. Are there any questions at this point?
Yeah, there are quite a few in the comment stream. So the first one is, how long does it take for teachers in a school to get on board with using this? Like basically from initial point of understanding to people actually using it day to day. What's been your experience with getting teacher adoption?
With teacher adoption is, you know, that's the holy grail, of course, with all of this. We've used a variety of systems. I'm not going to mention them because there's so many of them, and honestly, the beauty about Google Apps and about Google Sheets is that it's very low barrier to entry. This is, you know, it looks familiar to teachers. It's not intimidating, and it has you kind of have the ability to customize it so that it does what they need it to do. You know, if they want to change these indicators to read a certain way, or change the scale, or add to it, or detract from it, or come up with a new report, that's not necessarily difficult to do. The teacher buy-in is really around having that common curriculum and having those common assessments, agreeing on those common assessments and agreeing on that curriculum map, and then going through the hard work of actually norming so that you make sure that you're assessing at the same level, and your data is reliable. And that takes time. That takes a lot of time, and it really depends on where the school is and where those teacher teams are. Typically, depending on where the school is starting from, Teaching Matters usually works with a school over a course of 3 years or so. And by the end of those 3 years, things are really humming. And that's not to say it can't be, you know, really working well in the first year. But it does take time. This is something that will require, you know, that, again, just to reiterate, there's a lot of work that has to go into setting this tool up to work effectively. The tool itself, once you've done all that hard work, is very accessible, and it's not hard to, you know, it's not hard to take it from there.
Cool. We have another question about whether you use a system of target grades for individual students. So you know they have a baseline grade, but do they have a target grade for the end of each unit that's included in the tracker?
Well, they have targets for, when we work with teacher teams, they usually make targets, they usually set instructional goals around wherever they see a weakness. And so they don't necessarily, or I mean, in the schools that we've worked with, they don't necessarily target individual students or come up with, you know, that individual learning plan for each one, but they do group them. So they'll group them according, you know, they'll group them and then target them that way, and then those become their 6-week goals within their teacher teams.
I think, Eric, you had a question that you can ask?
Yes, I was just asking if that was a you know, a public template, but I also was going to ask if you know, do you see, I have to imagine there's a lot more teacher buy-in if all of the assessment trackers, you know, depending on the content, look similar or look the same, you know, if you guys are all starting with that.
It really helps, you know, and typically, you know, it depends on the school, and it really depends on the leader and really what the data that they want to be emphasizing and looking at, because they're going to drive the values and what's important. But because of that, if you've got a good leader, then typically they do end up looking really similar, and it does make it that much more easy to implement when it looks familiar amongst the staff. I don't know that this is a public template itself. I'm happy to share it with you guys at the end of this. And also, I try and post a lot on a website called upd.org. It's a really great site. It's kind of New York City based, but has some really great stuff on it in terms of Google Scripts and Google Apps. And I know I posted a tracker real similar to this on that. If you want to grab it there, you'll find some really good other stuff on there too. Is there anything else, Becky, or should I keep plugging away here?
We have a couple more questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
One is, how do teachers share progress with students? Do students have access to a similar tracker?
Yeah, on this one we haven't built that functionality into it. On the one that I've posted on UPD, there's a simple Google script that works off of each row that emails progress. So you can envision it here. If you added a column on here for the student's email, then if you entered that in there, then you're basically running one of the scripts that Google Scripts has as a tutorial, which is basically coming up with an email template that is emailing out each row their data and their progress. You could even have another column on here for the parent email address as well, if you wanted to set that up. And then you just create a button on your sheet to fire that script, or you set it to go out quarterly or monthly, or however you want to set that. There's another solution that I've seen, which is extremely cool. I can't really get into it in this session, but it's another thing you could search for on UPD. That takes a Google site and works off of the Google Sheet tracker, and the Google site recognizes who's logged in and just displays that row of data in a chart. So if a student has, if it's a school that's implemented Google Apps fully, where all the students have their own, usernames and passwords, it recognizes that they're logged into the site, and on that page it shows them just their data. That's something to find on UPD as well. You guys want to see another one, or do we have any more questions?
Yeah, I think they'd like to see more examples.
Cool. All right. Let me switch over. So this one isn't really a tracker, but I really want to show this one just to illustrate how you can use Google Sheets to do item analysis and really assist in that process of helping teacher teams kind of start to ask questions and do that notice and wonder around data. So this is an example of I mean, if we're all state educators, you've seen some of the data, the data files that come from those tests. This is a tool that allows you to copy data from one of those either predictive or common assessments that are state-run, or one of those assessments that you buy from a vendor. They're 30, 40 questions long, and each question is tied to an indicator. And in this case, the indicators are row 2 here. The key for the questions is here, and then all of the data for each student is just a copy and paste right onto this sheet. So this is your data entry tab. You can't really do anything with this. This is just where the data comes in. And what this school did was start to take that data and create some interesting tabs about how to start asking questions and looking at it. So this is a transpose of it, so it's just looking at the indicators as rows now and the students as columns, and then it starts grouping the questions themselves. Here, this is a better one. grouping the questions and returning who is getting the questions wrong, then grouping them even farther. So these are your main categories, and then auto-entering in, auto-populating who's getting these questions wrong and starting to do your groupings for you as a teacher. This is the same view, only it's giving you, I'm sure states have similar systems like this. It's telling you the percentages on who's, where your students are getting tripped on each of these questions. It's also grouping them for you in terms of who's getting them right and who's getting them wrong. So you can take a look at this data. Again, this isn't really a tracker because it's really just one test, but it's a sheet set up in a way that allows you to really do some item analysis. And is doing some hard work for you. It's grouping your students and allowing you to ask questions about it as you go. So it's helping in that triangulation process. And this is something that I know some tools do. A lot of them don't, though. I mean, the grouping is kind of powerful for teachers. So this is something I just thought would be interesting to touch on. I did want to show what a simple dashboard looks like, and unfortunately I don't have a dashboard that I can really share. I didn't have time to hide student names and all that stuff that I need to do. But I do have a dashboard that we use for our own staff where we are monitoring where they are and tracking the goals that they're setting. And so you can see, imagine this tracker kind of as a dashboard for an AP or principal that wanted to know how all of their different teams were functioning. There's two columns that I've hidden. One is the school itself, and then one is the coach, the team leader on there. So I just don't want to show people's names. I didn't tell them I was going to show this. So this is just a information only sheet that you're looking at. You can't enter any data on this because all of the data is coming from these spreadsheets. And it's using a really cool function called import range. And all it's doing is, all the import range function does is says, okay, open up this spreadsheet and return the data from these rows. And so if I go to one of these planners here, this is the spreadsheet that data is being pulled from. This is just a graphic organizer for the 5th grade data team to be setting their, identifying their data source. This is the process that they go through when they do their team meetings, when they set their objectives. So they're planning for action, they're setting goals, they're evaluating, and documenting where they are in the process. So this is the data entry tab. This is the sheet for the administrator to see where the teams, how the teams are performing. So this sheet is pulling in from 12 different spreadsheets. It's pulling in 12 different learning gaps and goals. It's saying, okay, this team is on meeting number 12. This team's on meeting number 12 and they haven't set a very good goal. There's a problem there. I need to go talk to that team leader and ask, why haven't you guys set a goal? Is this a data entry thing, or are you guys actually really struggling to come up with a goal and taking a lot of time to do this? I can go down and say, oh wow, look at these teams. They're already on cycle two. They've implemented their objectives. It looks like they've met them. They've provided evidence. So as an administrator, I get a really nice dashboard of what's going on. Now I realize that this is kind of different than what a traditional school would want. A school would want, teacher data or student progress data, but the concept, the functionality is similar. It's the same. And then the last one that I want to pull up, I won't spend much time on it because I'm not sure where people are in terms of what they're looking for, whether we want to focus on simple basics of how to set this up, or whether you want to shoot for the stars. This is something I'm working on with an intern from the Google Summer of Code. That is, it's using Google scripts to pull in from disparate data sources. So if people are familiar with Flubaroo, Flubaroo is a really nice script that an AdWords engineer from Google created because he was doing some part-time instruction and needed an easy way to grade his multiple choice assessments. So basically what you do is with Flubaroo, you set up a Google form, you provide it with an answer key, and then you run this Flubaroo script, and any student that you've shared that form with that has taken your multiple choice assessment gets graded. You run, you go Flubaroo, you go grade, grade, and it creates this tab for you that tells you how all of your students have done. What it doesn't do is track progress on the indicator level. It just gives you that raw score, that raw gradebook score. And so what I'm hoping to do through the Google Summer of Code is figure out a way to tie the Flubaroo scripts to indicators. And then also build in some templates to allow teachers to have disparate data sources. So all that predictive data, maybe they do their own custom spreadsheet that they want to be tracking data on, and bring all of that data into a central spot. And so this is really just a proof of concept. I thought I would share it because this is kind of the thing that I'm interested in. The assessment schedule tab here is just where you lay out all of your assessments. In this case, I only have Flubaroo ones, and they're all just demo ones. You put a link to the assessment, and then you provide the key, and the key is just a special code as part of the URL on the assessment. If you look at any Google spreadsheet, you'll see this long number right after key. That's the unique identifier for that spreadsheet. And I've got two scripts sort of mocked up, and trust me, these are just things that have been kind of spliced together. I'm no developer here. I'm just trying to come up with functionality so I can explain it to somebody who can code it. But you press this one, and it starts creating tabs for all of those Flubaroo tests that I outlined in my schedule. So I got test 1, test 2, test 3, test 4 coming now, and it's using that data import range, that import range function I was telling you about to bring the data in. You go back to here, you hit update grades, and you get what that script does is update this one master tab that allows you, now you have all of your data in one tab, and now you can start doing things like start to disaggregate the data over time. And so that's an example of Google Scripts, and what Google Scripts can do is provide you mechanisms for bringing disparate data sources together in one spot. And once you have that data in one spot, then you can start layering it, you can start reporting it, you can start making it visual, and you can start to show it in ways that are useful to instructors and useful to administrators. Geez, I'm sorry, it's already 4:37, and I want to make sure that we have time to kind of really go into depth with some of these, so I'm going to stop and let's talk about if people want to talk about challenges that we had or how to implement this, how to kind of do this in a school, or if you want to actually explore some of the functionality and some of the, how do you do conditional formatting, how do you do data validation, what are some of those formulas that we're using, we can dive into that as well.
Great. So if you're listening in and you have any particular requests, please put them in the comments stream. We had one more question that sort of tagged along what we were talking about earlier regarding filtering in the spreadsheets. So one member of the audience mentioned that teachers have a hard time when they're sharing spreadsheets to remember to turn off the filtering and whatnot. So do you train your teachers on how to do that beforehand, or is it something that they pick up over time?
Yeah, the filtering is really tricky on here. So it does require training, and to be honest, if it's something that is really necessary, if they're really using something as really frequently, if they need to filter it by their class, filter it by their group, we usually develop another tab for them, and so they don't actually have to filter anything. They just have to remember, oh, I just got to go to my tab that says ELL, or my tab that says IEP, or my tab that says Class 602, and it shows them that data. But it really depends on the teacher. It depends on the school. If it's if it's a school that really uses this stuff a lot, they don't need much training on how to filter. If it's somebody that's just getting started, you have to do a lot of hand-holding, and you have to kind of develop that stuff for them. It's a catch-22. If you develop it for them, then it becomes a crutch, and then they don't get, it still feels a little intimidating when they're using their data tracker. But if you don't develop certain things that they use really frequently, then they get frustrated and they don't want to use it. So it's definitely a balance. Eric and Brett, did you guys have anything that you wanted to tunnel down in on?
What content or what subject would you target first if you were going to try to implement this?
Math and science is very easy because the teachers, I've found at least, math and science has more common curriculum and more common assessments. It would, but it really, that's really the starting point for us, is where are the common assessments, where's the common curricula? Because if that is in place, odds are that the teachers are already really comfortable working in teams because they've probably developed that or at least normed on those or done some good work around that. And so this wouldn't be so much of a stretch for them. But if there isn't, if you're kind of starting, if you're starting from scratch and your school doesn't have common curricula, doesn't have common assessments, then the question really is, okay, where do I start with that? What is the grade level that will be most open to the idea or is farthest along with coming up with those? The technology will follow. Once they're comfortable working like that, then the technology is just a really good way for them to get to a more efficient way for them to do their work.
So I have a question on that one then, just as a follow-up. I have some teachers who are starting to develop data tracking like you've been presenting, but they're doing it in Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah.
So, and they're doing it as a shared file over our network system. What's the transition time from going to a format like that to going to a Google Docs format?
Very low.
Is it very low?
Yeah. I mean, depending on how complex are the spreadsheets they're setting up formula-wise?
They're working in math, and so they're pulling multiple formulas from multiple sheets in the same document, but they're basically using it as their unit test to figure out what was good, what was bad, what do they need to work on for immediate refinement, but also refinement in lessons for next year.
Yeah. As long as the formulas themselves aren't crazy, they'll transfer over almost perfectly, I would imagine. What
would be some of the big formulas that they might need to rework?
Does
it depend on, most of it's averages and transitioning data from one cell and one sheet to another cell and another sheet. So is that transition pretty seamless then?
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good question. I wish I had a list of those formulas that don't migrate over well, but in my experience, they're very there's some of the array formulas which are pretty complicated.
And that's what I've kind of seen in some other environments some of the spreadsheets we've been working on.
You don't know. Here's a good question. Have they ever had to hit Control-Shift-Enter at the end of a formula to make it work?
To copy it from one table to another table, I think they've had to do it once.
Okay. I don't think you'll have a problem. It's so easy. All you do is, if you have a Google account, just take the Excel file and just convert it. Just take a look. I don't think you'll have too much trouble with it, though.
Can you show real quick? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Can you show real quick how you did the color conditioning tracking?
Sure.
That's one step that they've been trying to figure out how to do in Excel, but.
So the color conditioning tracking is it's called conditional formatting. And let me do a new sheet here so we start from scratch. And so what you do is it's underneath format. You put your cursor in the cell, format, conditional formatting. And in the case of numbers and in rubric scores, you always want to, depending on what your scale is, you're just entering in different variables. So if you want it to be green for everything that's greater than 18, you choose greater than 18, and say you want the background to be green and the text to be blue. And then if you want anything that is between, say we want anything that's between 15 and 17, you want the background to be yellow and the text to be black. And then anything that is less than 15, let's make the background red and the text white. So that is the basic functionality, and then anytime you type a number in that, it changes color.
So the codes in the top corner were just entry codes that you just entered by hand.
Yeah, the scale is just like the instructions that the scale I just entered in by hand, so they knew what was referencing. Let me just show you one other thing. That only takes it for that one cell here.
Right.
But what you can do is the formatting painter takes conditional formatting. So if you put your cursor in the cell that does have the formatting, and click on the format painter here, and then select a whole range, all these cells now have that formatting.
Okay.
Let me show you one other thing that's kind of related to this. It's related to data validation. Oftentimes with these trackers, you'll have a column that is a total, but because teachers are they're cruising along, they're entering in data. Oftentimes they'll try and enter in 17 in there, and it'll ruin your formula, and it'll ruin your total, and then they get annoyed that the tracker's broken, and you got to go in and fix it. So somebody asked me, well, why don't you just put the total at the other end, which is stupid. We need to do that. That's obvious. But the point is that they will still, they'll still, if a user can screw it up, they will screw it up. So you can use data validation to ensure that the number is in between, to ensure that somebody's not editing it. So if I want to make sure no one ever edits this cell right here, A5, because it has a formula in it, I can go to data validation and then say, okay, this number has to be equal to, and then I can just put in some ridiculous number that no one will ever type. And now no one can ever screw this up for me. You can't type it. Oops, you can't type in there. Sorry, let me show you one other thing because I skipped an important step. Data validation. You gotta uncheck this. You can't allow invalid data. Otherwise, it just shows them a warning. But if you do that, now if you type something in there, it's going to give you an error message. You can do a formula, though.
Okay, so can you do the formula first, or do you do the formula second?
I don't know. Let's find out. You think you can do it? Yeah, you can do it either. I know you can do it first, and it just let me do it now. So those are two important things. Data validation is nice because it also allows you, if you do have a scale that needs to be consistent and you have multiple people entering in data, so say your scale is 15 through 20, you don't want to allow 13 in there, but you want to allow 15, you want to allow 20, you can do data validation and then make sure the number is between 14 and 21. Don't allow otherwise. And then so 15 will be allowed, but if I do 12, it's not going to let me.
Can only the owner of that doc turn that data validation on and off, or anybody who can edit?
Anyone that can edit, but in order to turn it off, you gotta go in and you gotta know what you're doing, and you gotta be purposefully malicious. I've never had a problem with that, and if there is a problem with that, you just do revision history and backtrack out of it. The other thing, and we gotta close up, but I do want to show just one other thing. You guys have used notification rules? Notification rules are cool with trackers if you're an administrator. So if you're a team leader or a principal and want to make sure that your teachers are using this thing, have them set up a notification rule where they get a daily digest anytime anything is changed on it. And that way it's just one email. They aren't getting annoyed every time somebody does something, but they can do just a check-in that the tool is getting used and that people are implementing it. And that's under Tools, Notification Rules.
Cool. So we have a couple more questions right before we wrap up.
All right.
So on the first tracker you showed, you selected a student name and then you got the graphs. Was that a script that you used, or was that a function that was built directly into Google Spreadsheets?
That's a function,
Mm-hmm.
and let me show that real quickly, or at least I don't know that I can really show it in detail, but I can kind of point you in the right direction for how that works. So, and there's more complex and more probably efficient ways to do this, but it worked for us. So, excuse me. Essentially, what this is a data validation from a list. So this cell B1 here has this drop-down menu, and what this cell is doing is pulling from, if I go to data and if I go down to validation, it's pulling the data from a range. So it's looking up units D5 through D27. So I go to sheet units, D5 through D20. Oops, see, I put in the email address because I was trying to show that. Let me delete that. So D5 through D27 is the student full name. So it's pulling in this whole list on this tab. And then whenever I select any of these students, this is my data row. And if you aren't familiar with how to use the VLOOKUP function, it's a complicated function. It's hard to get your mind around it initially, but trust me, if you understand the VLOOKUP function, and if you spend 15 minutes or an hour or however long it takes you to understand how that thing works, it's going to open up a lot of doors for you and start getting you to think creatively around how to use all this. But essentially what the VLOOKUP function does is it says, okay, choose a piece of data on this sheet that you want me to look up against. So in this case, it's trying to look up B1, which is the student name. And then it's saying, okay, give me an array, give me a range of data to look up Dania F against. And so that range of data is my units tab, D5 through BU27. So it's looking up D5, which is this, all the way over here. It's looking up all of this data here. And what the formula is doing is saying, okay, match B1, which was, I forgot her name, what was it? Dania. So match Dania. Where is she? There she is. So match Dania, row 12, and return column 3 from where you started. So I started on D, and it's returning column 3. So if I count from D, 1, 2, 3, it's going to return the class. So it's looking up Dania's class, it's looking up Dania's group, and then it's looking up all of Dania's data. And because the data is always on the same row, these charts are just returning this row of data. Does that make sense? It's really tough to explain the VLOOKUP formula, so I apologize if that's confusing. But it's basically looking up a data point against a set of data and returning matching data for that data point. So it's basically returning data off of each of the students.
Cool. And we just have one final question that we can end with, I guess, regarding other ways to track. So obviously Spreadsheets is a really awesome way to track mastery of standards, but are you guys using ePortfolios or any other type of trackers to...
We've set up ePortfolios using Google Apps, using actually Google Site templates. So the school comes up with a template around the kind of stuff that they want the student to be able to share, and then the student generates a portfolio off of that. And that's kind of a cool way of doing it. We've been working with an organization called Jump Rope, which does some really cool stuff too. You might want to check them out. They're a real data platform provider, and also an organization called Hapara, which layers upon Google Apps in some really nice ways. They're based out of New Zealand or Australia. I think they're New Zealand. Forgive me, Jan, if I'm getting you wrong, but they're doing some very cool stuff. Layering upon Google Apps and basically scripting out a lot of portfolio stuff and assessment stuff for schools. That's called Hapara. Cool. Well, thank you guys very much. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was informative, and you know, I look forward to keeping in touch via Google.
Awesome. Thanks again, Evan. And again, if you'd like to join any other sessions, we have a few more going on for the rest of the day. So thanks again. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Take it easy.